Hello, welcome to my fairy tale channel. My name is Jadwiga. I'm going to tell you a story about the people of the Seneca and how they received their stories, because there was a time when they did not know any stories. So the story goes like that. Once upon a time there was a little orphaned boy, and a neighbor woman had taken him in her house after his parents had passed away. Now, when the boy grew older, one day the woman handed him over a bow and some arrows and said, "Go out in the woods and shoot birds, because when you're a good hunter, you will never ever suffer from hunger." The boy went into the woods and came home with a long cord of birds which he had put on that rope. And the stepmother was very happy. The following day, he brought even more birds. And the third day, he brought so many that the stepmother made bundles of 3 or 4 birds and brought them to the neighbors. So on the 4th day, the boy got deeper into the forest, and while looking around for a place for a rest, he saw a huge flat rock, and he sat down on that rock to have his meal. All of a sudden, there was a voice asking, "Would you like to hear a story?" And the boy was frightened because he couldn't see anybody and looked around but did not know where that voice came from. And that repeated, "Do you want to hear a story?" And he jumped off that rock, looked around behind the bushes everywhere, but he could not see anybody. And now the voice repeated angrily, "Do you want to hear a story?" Well, the boy did not know what a story was because, as I said, the Seneca did not know any stories so far. But he was curious, especially since he had realized now that this voice came out of the rock. And he said, "Yes." "Well," said the voice, "so give me your birds and then listen." So the boy put down his birds and listened to the stories the rock told him. And the rock told story after story after story from the time before time. And when the night came, the rock said, "Well, now go home and try to shoot a couple of birds at least. And when your stepmother asks why you didn't bring any today, you just say, 'Well, I have been shooting so many during the last couple of days, they are all gone. There are no more birds. And come back tomorrow.'" The boy did as the rock had said. And when he came home and his stepmother was surprised, "Why, where are your birds?" he said, "I have shot them all. There are no more." The stepmother did not really believe that, but she didn't say anything. So the next day, the boy went straight away to the rock after he had shot a couple of birds to bring it to him. And the same thing happened like the day before. The rock told him stories, and at night he said, "Now go home and tell your stepmother that there are no more birds." The stepmother was very suspicious. So she asked 2 of the neighbor boys and said, "Follow my stepson tomorrow and tell me what he does with the birds." And the 2 boys followed to the huge rock. And when they saw their friend sitting on the rock and heard this voice, they could not explain that, so they stepped out from behind the bush where they had been hiding and said, "What's going on here? Whom are you talking to?" And the boy said, "Well, put your birds down and listen. So now the three of them were sitting on that big rock and listened to the story. Now when they came home, they told the boy's stepmother, there are no birds anymore. There are none left. The stepmother did not trust them, so she called a neighbor, a grown-up man, and said, follow those boys, I want to know what they are doing with the birds. And the man did that, and of course he reached the rock too, and he heard a voice. He could not see anybody, and so he stepped out from behind that bush where he had been hiding and asked, what are you doing here? Whom are you talking to? And the boys first got frightened, but then said, shh, come on, sit down, listen. And now the four of them listened to the stories from the time before time. That night, the rock said, well, I'm finished for today, but tomorrow I want you to bring all the people of your village, and everybody should bring something to eat and prepare that space around me so that you can all sit down and listen to my stories. That night, the boy went to the chief and told him what the stone had said. And the chief sent messengers to all of the families and told them to gather next morning and to bring something to eat. Now the whole village, all of the people, came to the stone, cleared the space around, sat down, put their food onto the rock, sat down and listened. And the rock told stories from the time before time. Many, many stories he told, and when the night came, he said, well, now I'm finished. Listen, some of you might remember every single word I've said. Some of you might remember most of it or part of it, and some of you might maybe just remember a couple of words. It doesn't matter. I want you to tell these stories to your children, to your grandchildren, to your great-grandchildren, to tell them forever. Because this is your history, this is your culture, and you need to keep that alive. So I am finished for today, and I will never ever tell any stories. So you go home and keep these stories alive. Yes, and that's what the people of the Seneca did. They still keep their stories alive. The stories from the time before time which they have received from a rock.